you haven't watched parts 1 and 2, go watch those before you watch this. And sorry for the little bit of a delay. Here's the history of Nintendo Part 3. In 1978, Nintendo's research and development department split into two different facilities. In 1979, there were two events that would change Nintendo. An American facility opened up in New York City, and there was new development on arcade games. Nintendo released their first handheld system, the Game & Watch, in 1980. There were 59 games made for it, and it sold over 43 million units worldwide. Nintendo had a lot of arcade success in 1981 with Donkey Kong, which was developed by Miyamoto. It was also one of the first video games that allowed the character to jump. The character's name was Jumpman, which will later become known as Mario. In 1983, due to third-party developers making an oversaturation of bad games and other things, the video game crash of 1983 took place. As a consequence, the American gaming industry hit a big recession, whose revenues went from over $3 billion to $100 million between 1983 and 1985. Also in 1983, Nintendo released the Family Computer, or Famicom for short, in Japan. They were also working on developing a version for Americans, but they were impacted heavily due to the crash. To make the Famicom different from the American version, Nintendo redesigned the new version as an entertainment system compatible with game packs, and a design similar to a VCR. The final product was the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES for short, released in 1985 in North America. Also, this was the start of a big jump in video games once again, with Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. Production of the Famicom interestingly lasted longer than the NES, lasting until 2003, but NES production stopped in 1995. Combined, around 62 million units were sold worldwide. Nintendo made a piracy measurement with the official Nintendo seal of quality. Nintendo's network had also expanded to around 30 companies by now, including Ricoh, Nintendo's main source for semiconductors. In 1988, Gunpei Yokoi and his team conceived the Nintendo Game Boy, which would be the first handheld console with interchangeable cartridges. Also in 1988, the first issue of the Nintendo Power magazine came out. The next year, in 1989, the Game Boy released. It was an instant success, selling out Japan's initial inventory of 300,000 units. In addition, about 40,000 units were sold in North America on the first day alone. Also around this eventful time, Nintendo and Sony made an agreement to develop the Super Famicom CD-ROM adapter for the upcoming Super Famicom. An American version was also made called the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or the SNES for short. The Japanese version was released in 1990, and the North American version the following year in 1991. Launch titles included Super Mario World, F-Zero, SimCity, and many more. Earlier in 1990, the first Nintendo World Championships were held, with participants from all across the United States competing for the title of Best Nintendo Player in the World. Also in 1990, Nintendo of Europe was opened in Groppelstein, Germany. Over the years, more and more offices opened up across Europe. In 1992, Nintendo even bought the Seattle Mariners baseball team, but sold it in 2016. The controversy surrounding violent video games such as Mortal Kombat led to the creation of several video game rating systems, and Nintendo collaborated with them in 1994. Nintendo also made the Nintendo Gateway system, a way to play some Nintendo games on some airlines. In 1995, Nintendo released the Virtual Boy, designed by Gunpei Yokoi with VR technology and stereoscopic graphics. Unfortunately, it was a failure, selling only 770,000 units. Part of the reason was that the red-colored graphics caused headaches, and with this, you hired from Nintendo. The next year, in 1996, Pokemon Monsters Red and Green, known around the world as Pokemon Red and Blue, was released for the Game Boy, and established a popular Pokemon franchise. The Game Freak developed game ended up selling 31.37 million units. As of 2017, the entire Pokemon franchise has sold over 300 million units in total. Going back 1 year to 1995, the new Nintendo 64 was originally planned to release, but was delayed due to the production schedules of third-party developers. In June and September 1996, the Nintendo 64 finally released in Japan and the US respectively, with the console coming out in Europe in March of 1997. The console is one of the most well-known in gaming history, with over 33 million units being sold by the end of its lifespan in 2002. Some games on the system, like The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and Super Mario 64, have become known as some of the best games of all time. In 1997, Nintendo released the Rumble Pack, a plug-in device for the Nintendo 64 controller to produce vibration during certain moments of a game. In 1998, Nintendo released the Game Boy Color. It had backwards compatibility with Game Boy games. Since then, the Game Boy and Game Boy Color have sold over 118.6 million units combined. In 1999, with the PlayStation 2 and its massive success, Nintendo realized it would need to go all out to surpass it. Them, along with IBM and Panasonic, developed a 128-bit Gecko processor, as well as a DVD drive for the next home console. In the year 2000, the new millennium, Nintendo's corporate offices were moved to a different neighborhood in Kyoto, and Nintendo Benelux was established to help manage the Dutch and Belgian territories. The next year in 2001, however, was much more eventful. The big handheld was the Game Boy Advance, coming out in March and June 2001 in Japan and North America, respectively. In North America alone, the console sold 500,000 units within the first week, making it the fastest-growing video game console in American history at the time. Additionally, by the end of production in 2010, the GBA sold more than 81.5 million units worldwide. For the home console, we had the Nintendo GameCube, releasing in September and November of 2001 in Japan and North America, respectively. Unfortunately, it did worse than its predecessors, and in 6 years it only sold about 21.7 million units worldwide. During this time, the Nintendo e-readers was also developed, a GBA add-on that allowed the transfer of data stored on cards to the console. In 2002, the smallest game console in history was released, the Pokemon Mini, which weighed only 70 grams and had dimensions smaller than the GBA. After the European release of the GameCube in May 2002, Hiroshi Yamauchi announced his resignation from the president of Nintendo. Yamauchi went on to remain as advisor and director of Nintendo for 3 more years, but sadly passed away 8 years later in 2013 at the age of 85. The man who succeeded him was Satoru Iwata, the first man to be president of Nintendo outside of the Yamauchi family. And with that, join me in part 4 next week. Thanks for watching.
Standing still as I let go of your cold hand. Eyes are wet, but lips are dry, and all the things we